Dear dreamer, and thank you for joining me tonight, here in this quiet corner of the night. This is Whispers of the Night, a place where stories drift gently through silence, and each tale is woven to carry you softly toward rest. Tonight, I invite you to close your eyes and imagine the stillness of a kingdom long ago, where silence was not emptiness, but a kind of music only the heart could hear. The story you will hear is called The Star and the Silent Prince. It is a tale about friendship found in silence, about light that does not fade, and about the gentle truth that sometimes the brightest songs are the ones without words. As the night deepens, let yourself be carried away by the hush of the garden, the shimmer of a star's glow, and the comfort of knowing that stories, like dreams, can hold you in their arms. So settle into your place of rest and allow the soft night air of this story to wrap around you. Together, we'll wander through shadow and starlight and listen for the quiet song of a prince and the star who chose to stay. Before we begin our journey tonight, let's take a few quiet moments to prepare the body for rest. First, take in a slow, deep breath and let it flow all the way down into your belly. Hold it for a gentle moment, and then release it softly, like a sigh carried by the evening breeze. With each breath, you begin to feel the day drifting away. All the noise, all the movement, all the little worries of the daylight softly loosening their hold. Imagine you are standing in a quiet, starlit garden. The air is cool, yet perfectly gentle on your skin. Each flower holds a drop of silver dew, and the night sky above is scattered with glowing constellations. Take another slow breath in, and as you breathe out, picture yourself sinking into stillness. Just like the earth settles beneath the stars, your shoulders relax, your hands grow light, your chest rises and falls with ease. Every part of you knows that this is a time for calm, a time for renewal. Now, listen. Beyond the silence, there is a soft rhythm, like the hush of leaves swaying in the night wind. This rhythm carries you deeper inward, into a space where nothing is urgent and everything is allowed to rest. You are safe, you are calm, you are ready for sleep. And as you breathe slowly, the story is waiting to begin, a story of light, silence, and the gentle bond between a star and a prince who dreamed without words. The Star and the Silent Prince. The Silent Prince. The sea has always been a teacher of silence. When you walk along the shore, the waves do not raise their voices. They come and they go, whispering their eternal rhythm, steady and soft, like the breath of something much larger than yourself. In the kingdom by the water's edge, silence was more than an absence of sound. It was a language of its own, and no one embodied this more than the young prince. He was known throughout the land as the boy who never spoke. His lips never shaped words. And though the courtiers tried to coax him, though tutors brought books filled with letters and sounds, he remained wordless. Some whispered that he was cursed. Yet when the people looked into his eyes, they found no emptiness, but rather a depth, like the deep ocean at twilight, holding something beyond easy understanding. The prince was not empty of words, he simply carried them differently. Where others released their thoughts into the air, he kept his within, turning them over like polished stones in his hand. At night he would wander through the palace gardens, where the fountains trickled and the crickets sang, and he would tilt his head toward the sky. The stars, he thought, never spoke either, yet all the world bent its gaze toward them, listening. If the stars could shine without speaking, perhaps he could live that way too. Silence, though, is not the same as loneliness. And yet, the prince carried loneliness as one carries a hidden stone in a pocket, its weight familiar, its presence unspoken. The people of the court filled their days with chatter, with bargains and games, with music and dance. He listened to them, smiled when it was expected, and nodded in acknowledgement. But his true attention drifted elsewhere, to the language of things unvoiced. He could hear the seabirds before anyone else. He noticed the shift in their wings when a storm approached. He saw the leaves tremble, heard the faint rattle in the branches, before the wind rose loud enough for the others to notice. He heard the hush in the hush, the pauses in conversation, the unspoken fears in the way someone held their breath or pressed their hands too tightly together. Science tells us that listening is more than hearing sound. The ear is a delicate labyrinth, spirals of bone and fluid, tiny hairs that bend to vibration. Yet beyond the anatomy lies attention, the way your brain filters the flood of noise into meaning. You too live in a storm of signals, the rustle of your clothes, the hum of unseen machines, the faint pressure of your own breath in your throat. Your ears take them all in, but you notice only what your mind allows. The prince, though, noticed almost everything. He learned to read the world without words. When he watched the tide, he did not see only water, but rhythm, a pulse, not unlike a heartbeat. Each wave curved forward, spent itself upon the shore, then retreated into silence, only to begin again. He studied the sand, the way it shifted in little avalanches beneath his feet. He followed the patterns of shells, scattered like a language written by the sea itself. He leaned close to the ground and watched ants trail along invisible highways, carrying burdens many times their size. Yet silence has its own strength. In the quiet, his mind held clarity. He could solve puzzles others struggled with, noticing the missing piece, the overlooked detail. When he looked at someone's face, he noticed not the words they said, but the twitch in the corner of their eye, the way their breath faltered on a sigh. His silence, he realized, was not emptiness, but focus, a gathering of the world in subtler tones. You may have felt this yourself, perhaps in the hush before sleep. When you lie in bed and the day's chatter fades, you begin to notice sounds you had ignored, the faint ticking of a clock, the sigh of wind pressing against the window pane, the soft expansion of your own lungs. Silence reveals what was always there, waiting for you to listen. The prince's nights were filled with such listening. He would climb to the tower of the palace and look out over the sea. The stars shimmered, their light ancient, reaching him after traveling thousands, even millions of years. He thought about how silence does not mean nothing is happening. Even when no one speaks, the stars still move, the earth still spins, your blood still flows, unceasing. The heart does not need words to beat. One evening, as he sat among the lantern-lit gardens, he noticed a firefly glowing faintly among the reeds. It flickered on, then off, then on again, pulsing gently like a heartbeat in the dark. Science tells us that fireflies speak in light. Each flash is a signal, a pattern, an invitation. In their silence, they write whole conversations across the summer air. The prince leaned close and smiled. Here was a creature who spoke as he did, without sound, but with meaning bright and clear. He began to follow them, through the gardens, into the fields, beyond the edge of the palace grounds. The fireflies drew him toward the deeper night, where the silence was softer, where the stars felt closer, and in their flickering light, he felt a comfort he had not known before, the comfort of being understood, even without words. Silence is not an absence, he thought. It is a presence. The presence of listening, of seeing, of feeling. In silence, the mind expands, filling with what speech often pushes away. The hush between notes in music, the pause before a wave crashes, the breath before a confession, all of these hold their own kind of truth. You might think of silence as darkness, but the prince thought of it as dawn, the moment before the world speaks, when possibility hovers in the air. He dreamed, sometimes, of a friend who would understand this, who would not rush to fill the quiet with chatter, but who would sit beside him and hear the same hidden music he did. And though the people of the kingdom could not see it, the prince's silence was never empty. It was full of stars, of tides, of fireflies, of secrets written in wind and water. He spoke constantly, but his language was one the world had forgotten how to read. Perhaps, he thought, there would come a day when someone would answer. The night deepened, the fireflies drifted like lanterns into the dark, and the sea kept its endless rhythm. Somewhere in the distance, a new sound stirred, faint and strange, waiting to be heard. And it was in listening to that sound, uncertain yet familiar, that the prince's silence began to lean toward its first reply. A reply that would carry him into the next chapter's mystery of voices beyond words. The star that fell to earth. Twilight arrives like a slow exhale, softening the edges of the day. The sky above the sea kingdom folds itself into layers of indigo and rose, as though painted by invisible hands, dipping brushes into pools of fading light. The air cools, carrying the faint salt of the tide, and lanterns bloom across the palace, grounds like grounded stars. On this evening, when the world seemed particularly hushed, something unusual stirred in the fabric of the sky. Above the gardens, a star shifted from its appointed place. At first, it trembled like a drop of dew sliding down a leaf. Then, in silence, it slipped free from the dome of night. The people of the court did not notice, for their eyes were busy with feast and music. But the prince, who lived by silence, saw the light descending. It drifted slowly, as though carried on unseen threads. Science tells us that stars do not truly fall. The ones we see streaking across the night are meteors, fragments of stone and dust burning as they race through the atmosphere. Yet two eyes that do not measure, but only wonder. The sight is no less miraculous. A falling star is both destruction and illumination, the end of something far away, and the birth of a story close at hand. The star alighted in the garden, nestling among the silver reeds and the still fountain. Its glow was not harsh, but gentle, pulsing faintly like a heart. When the prince stepped closer, barefoot across the cool grass, she was shaped like a girl, yet she shimmered with the translucence of moonlight reflected in water. She did not speak, her lips did not move, nor did her gaze hold the rhythm of conversation. But the prince, who had lived his life in silence, felt no confusion. He only sat beside her in the grass, the two of them glowing faintly under the velvet sky. In science, light itself is a language. Every star emits energy across invisible spectra, sending ripples of photons racing outward at unimaginable speed. The sun that warms your skin is a constant flood of messages, streaming across space to nourish plants, ignite colors, and awaken life. Stars, in their brilliance, are always speaking, not in words, but in wavelengths. The star who had come to Earth seemed to embody this truth. She shone without speaking, and yet her silence was not empty. The prince reached out his hand. Her glow spilled across his skin, painting it with soft luminescence. He thought of the fireflies he had watched the night before, and how they too communicated without voice. He thought of the tide, which rose and fell with a rhythm more eloquent than speech, and he realized that in her silence she was not unlike himself. Together they walked the garden paths. The star drifted rather than stepped, her feet not quite pressing into the earth, yet she moved with him as though they had always known each other. When the wind stirred, her glow rippled as though woven from threads of light. Its fountain reflected her form in liquid mirrors, scattering her radiance into shimmering fragments. The prince found comfort here. For the first time, he did not feel the weight of being misunderstood. He did not need to explain his silence, nor endure the puzzled eyes of courtiers who measured worth in speech. Here was someone who, like him, held a voice that did not need words. Science reminds us that silence is not absence, but a different kind of fullness. Deep space, for instance, appears empty, but it hums with radiation, with particles drifting at Nernthing density, with the whisper of cosmic background left from the birth of the universe. What we call quiet is often a canvas filled with hidden sound. The star seemed to carry that truth with her. Even in her stillness, she vibrated with presence, as though her glow carried echoes of ancient fires still burning far above. They lingered until the moon climbed higher. The star would touch the petals of flowers, and they opened more fully beneath her light, tricked into believing it was dawn. The prince would kneel to watch tiny moths drawn toward her radiance, their wings stirring the night air like faint fans. Together, they traced constellations in the sky, pointing silently with fingers and beams of light, naming them not with words but with shared glances. You may know that constellations are not true gatherings of stars, but illusions of perspective. One star may be close, another unimaginably far, yet to your eyes they seem to belong together. Stories rise from these illusions: hunters, lions, goddesses, rivers of milk across the sky. Humans have always gathered meaning from scattered light. The prince and the star, sitting in the quiet garden, became their own constellation that night. Two silent figures, shining in parallel. He wanted to ask her where she had come from, whether she had left companions among the heavens, whether she would remain or return to the sky. But he carried no words to ask, and she carried no words to answer. Instead, they watched the night deepen, content in the shared knowledge that not every question needs its reply. There is a science to companionship, to studies of the human brain reveal that in the presence of another being, even without speech, our rhythms begin to align. Heartbeats sync, breathing steadies, the nervous system softens its tension like a string eased from a knot. The prince felt this gentle alignment. In her presence, the loneliness he had carried like a hidden stone seemed, for the first time, lighter. Hours passed as softly as ripples. The star began to dim slightly, not from fading, but from adjusting, as though she was learning to breathe the air of this world. Her glow softened into something warmer, and when the dawn began to paint the horizon, her light blended seamlessly with the rising sun. That the prince knew, without needing to be told, that she had not come by chance. She had been drawn, perhaps, by silence itself, by his listening, by the quiet space he carried within. Perhaps, he thought, silence is a kind of gravity, pulling toward itself what belongs. As the sun rose, the courtiers emerged, murmuring at the sight of their silent prince standing with this mysterious, glowing figure. They whispered of omens, of blessings, of curses, but the prince only smiled faintly, letting their words drift away like waves breaking too far to touch him. He knew the truth could not be explained in their language, for in the star's quiet presence, he had seen himself reflected, not as a boy who lacked words, but as someone who belonged to a greater pattern, one that stretched from the earth beneath his feet to the galaxies spinning overhead. The gardens grew bright with day. The star lingered, her form faint in the sunlight, but still shimmering. The prince felt no need to hold her, nor fear her departure. Whatever came next, he knew that silence had spoken, and he had been heard. And in the soft hush between sunrise and day, he wondered if silence could draw a star to earth. What other voices, hidden beyond sound, might be waiting to arrive? language of light. Every companionship begins with an attempt to bridge distance. Sometimes that bridge is built with words, tumbling out in hurried strings. Sometimes it grows from glances, from small gestures that linger long enough to be noticed. And sometimes, as the prince discovered, it is woven of light. The star had no voice in the way humans understand voice. Her glow, however, carried rhythm. At times, it pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat. At other times, it shimmered quick and playful, like water struck by sunlight. The prince watched, curious, and felt that these changes were not random, but purposeful, an intention glimmering behind the brightness. So he began to answer. When she flickered brightly, he raised his hand, tracing a slow circle in the air, as though echoing her pulse. When her light rippled, he bent the reeds by the fountain to catch the glow, scattering it into 1,000 fragments, letting her see how her shimmer became many. This was not speech, as the courtiers knew it, but it was dialogue, unfolding gently. Like two rivers meeting, science explains that communication is not bound to words alone. Across the living world, beings converse in ways both subtle and profound. Fireflies flash patterns of light, their signals unique to species, like dialects, written in sparks. Whales send songs, spiraling through water, notes that can travel for hundreds of miles in the ocean's deep corridors. Even trees, rooted and voiceless, send messages through chemical releases in the air and electric pulses beneath the soil, warning of drought, sharing nutrients, or calling for aid. The prince did not know these studies, yet he lived their truth. By attending to her glow, he felt what whales feel in song, what fireflies declare across a meadow, the joy of being received. Day after day, they shaped this silent language. She would flicker quick bursts of light, and he would tap the ground. With his hand in echo, she would shine steadily bright, and he would open his arms wide, showing he understood her stillness as fullness. Together, they invented a vocabulary without need of letters. At night, when the moon drifted high, they played with shadows. She glowed softly behind him, and his silhouette stretched across the garden wall. He traced animals with his hands, a bird in flight, a deer bending its head, and she answered by brightening their outlines. In laughter unspoken, they filled the darkness with creatures born of shadow and glow. The palace, once filled with hollow echoes of conversations he could not join, now shimmered with their secret dialogue. Servants passed through the halls, puzzled by sudden flickers of light along the walls, as though lanterns breathed when no wind stirred them. Courtiers whispered about strange illuminations in the gardens at night. Yet the prince said nothing, and the star had no need to. Their language belonged only to them. Science reminds us that the human brain is exquisitely tuned to pattern. From the moment you open your eyes, you search for rhythm and repetition, the beat of footsteps, the arc of a bird's flight, the cadence of rain. This tendency, called pattern recognition, is what allows you to read language at all, to turn lines and curves of ink into meaning. It is also what allows two beings, even without shared speech, to find common ground. The prince and the star were guided by this instinct. They found pattern in each other, and made meaning from it. In her presence, the prince learned something about his own silence. He had always thought of his quietness as emptiness, a space where words should have been. But with her, silence was a canvas. Upon it, their gestures and light painted stories as vivid as any tale told aloud. He realized that communication was not the act of filling silence, but the act of sharing presence. One evening, as they sat by the reflecting pool, the star brightened suddenly, her glow flickering in rapid pulses. The prince tilted his head, sensing urgency. He leaned close and dipped his hand into the water, rippling its surface. The reflection fractured her glow into fragments, each pulse scattering outward like waves. He pointed to the widening circles. She pulsed again, and he understood. She was speaking of movement, of something spreading, of connection flowing outward. Science tells us that light itself spreads in waves. A single photon ripples outward, moving at a constant speed through the vacuum of space. It is both particle and wave, mystery and law, journeying farther than thought can follow. The stars' pulses were not just light, they were echoes of the cosmos itself, the same patterns that carried sunlight to Earth, the same that painted rainbows on falling mist. The prince, without textbook or tutor, understood her language through the mirror of water. Together, they began to build a grammar of glow and gesture. A slow flicker meant calm. A quick pulse meant excitement. A soft, steady shine meant gratitude. The prince answered with hands and eyes, a palm pressed to his chest, a circle traced in the air, a head bowed gently forward. Their conversations grew longer, stretching deep into the night, until dawn slipped pale fingers over the horizon. It is said that language shapes thought. What you can name, you can hold more clearly in your mind. But for the prince, this new language revealed something different. That thought can live even without names. That meaning is larger than syllables. His bond with the star was not reduced to words. It was expanded beyond them. One night, as the gardens lay in deep shadow, he wondered whether anyone else could ever learn this language of light. Could the courtiers, with all their chatter, understand its simplicity? Could they slow themselves enough to notice a flicker, to answer with stillness? He was not sure. Yet he knew that between him and the star, the bridge had been built, and it was enough. Asterisk, asterisk. Science shows that when two people truly connect, their brains begin to mirror one another. Neural patterns synchronize, like dancers falling into the same rhythm. It happens in conversation, in music, in moments of deep attention. The prince felt this mirroring in his silence with her. When she dimmed, he breathed softer. When she pulsed, his heart seemed to quicken in reply. They were two beings, yet they glowed as though sharing one rhythm. Time passed gently in this way. Days slipped into weeks, weeks into months. The palace, though unchanged in stone and tower, began to feel transformed. The prince no longer carried silence as burden, but as gift. For now he knew silence could be shared. In her company, loneliness loosened its hold. In her glow, he found his own light reflected back, and though words never passed between them, their understanding was deeper than any sentence could hold. As the season turned, The first storms gathered over the sea. The waves grew restless, the winds stronger. The stars' light flickered in longer patterns, as though preparing to speak something more complex, something beyond their simple grammar of gestures. The prince watched her, sensing that their language was about to open into something wider. And in that restless night, as the first thunder rolled faintly across the horizon, he wondered what new meanings might awaken when light itself begins to sing like a storm. The shadow that envied every light draws its contrast. Where brightness falls, a shadow follows, stretching long and watchful. The prince had always lived with shadows, the quiet recesses of the palace halls, the corners where torchlight never quite reached, the dark between stars that made the heavens seem deeper. But these were natural shadows, born of balance. The one that arrived now was different. It was not content to exist alongside light. It hungered to smother it. The first time he noticed it, the prince thought it was only his imagination. He and the star sat beside the reflecting pool, shaping their silent language of glow and gesture, when he sensed something pressing in at the edges of the night. The lanterns flickered, though no wind stirred them. The air grew cooler, as though someone had drawn a curtain across the warmth. When he looked over his shoulder, he saw darkness thicker than ordinary shadow, pooling at the edges of the garden. Science tells us that shadows are not things in themselves. They are simply the absence of light, shapes carved by the blocking of radiance. Yet, in human thought, shadows often gather meaning. They become symbols of fear, doubt, or hidden truth. Psychologists suggest that the mind projects its worries into such emptiness, filling darkness with form. The prince felt this. In his bones, the shadow was shaped from something inside him. Given presence by the night, it slithered closer, though it made no sound. Unlike the star, who spoke in pulses of brightness, the shadow communicated in whispers, not words exactly, but threads of suggestion brushing against the edges of thought. "You are voiceless," it murmured. "She shines, but you are only silence. She glows for the world, and you remain unseen. What companion can you be when you have no voice to return her light?" The prince lowered his eyes. These whispers struck chords of doubt he had carried all his life. He remembered the puzzled courtiers, the disappointed tutors, the pitying smiles of those who believed his silence was brokenness. He remembered the ache of watching others laugh in conversation while he remained outside the circle of sound. The shadow wrapped these memories around him like a cold cloak. The star noticed his dimming spirit. Her glow pulsed steadily, reaching toward him, but the shadow coiled around her too, wrapping itself across her brightness. The garden seemed to darken, as though a cloud had swallowed the moon. Science offers another truth here. Light can be diminished by obstruction, but it cannot be destroyed. Even the smallest spark will remain visible in great darkness, because photons travel relentlessly, refusing to vanish. In space, a single star burns against a black expanse, so vast it should be lost, yet it endures, carrying its light for millions of years. The star in the garden embodied this truth. Even as the shadow tried to cloak her, her glow seeped through, a stubborn shimmer along its edges. The prince watched closely. He realized that while the shadow whispered of doubt, it had no substance of its own. It was strong only where he gave it power. His silence was not emptiness. He had learned that already. In silence, he had found listening, presence, and a new language with the star. The shadow's envy fed on forgetting. He lifted his hand slowly, tracing a circle in the air. The star answered with a flicker, faint but steady. Together, they shaped their gestures against the dark. The shadow recoiled, as though irritated by their refusal to listen. Still, it pressed close. "You will lose her," it whispered. "She is made of light, and you are made of nothing. One day she will return to the heavens, and you will be left alone once more." The prince shivered. Was this true? He looked at the star, who shimmered softly beside him, her glow quivering as though she, too, could feel the weight of the shadows. Doubt. He thought of how fireflies vanish with the season, how storms rise and pass, how even constellations shift over centuries. Perhaps she would leave. Perhaps all things leave. But science reminds us, nothing in the universe is truly lost. Energy transforms, but does not disappear. The warmth of the sun that touches your skin travels onward, absorbed by the earth, released again in different forms. A falling star becomes dust, but that dust rains down to enrich oceans, to seed the air, to settle into soil where new life grows. The prince remembered this, and slowly, his breath calmed. He placed his palm gently against the earth, the soil. Beneath him was cool, alive with unseen life roots, insects, tiny organisms carrying out their endless work. All of it silent, yet none of it meaningless. He looked up again at the star, who brightened faintly in reply. The shadow hissed at this quiet defiance, swelling darker, trying to stretch across the whole garden. But the more it reached, the thinner it became. For in chasing every patch of light, it revealed its hollowness. And when the star's glow pulsed strong, and the prince lifted his hands in steady rhythm beside her, the shadow thinned into nothing more than ordinary darkness again. Silence fell across the garden, not the oppressive hush of doubt, but the restful quiet of resolution. The air grew warmer, the lanterns steadied, the pool reflected the star's glow once more, scattering it into ripples of light. The prince exhaled slowly. He understood now that the shadow was not an enemy outside himself, but the echo of his own fear. It could whisper, but it could not silence truth. His silence was not a wound, but a space where new language could bloom. And the star, steadfast beside him, proved that his presence was enough. Science of the mind teaches that when you bring awareness to fear, its grip weakens. To name a worry is to place light upon it, and light changes everything it touches. The prince, though he had no voice, had named the shadow in his heart. He had seen it for what it was, envy made of emptiness, thriving only in neglect. of one's own glow. He and the star sat together until dawn, exchanging patterns of flicker and gesture, reaffirming their bond. The shadow lingered, in memory, but it no longer frightened him. Instead, he carried it as reminder that even in silence, doubts may whisper. Yet light will always find its way through. When the first rays of morning spilled across the horizon, the shadow dissolved, completely chased away by the rising sun. The prince tilted his head back, letting the warmth rest upon his skin. He felt the star beside him, faint in daylight, but still present, still glowing softly, as though promising that light never abandons those who listen. Yet, as the sun climbed higher, a new question formed in his heart. If shadows could whisper from within, what voices might echo from the skies above, where storms and stars meet in restless song? The silent song. Silence is never empty. It is full of hidden shapes, of pulses, of breath and heartbeat, of the unseen rhythm that threads life together. You close your eyes and sink into this quiet, letting it wrap around you the way a blanket holds warmth in the stillness of night. For the prince, silence had always been his companion. It was the place where his voice, absent in sound, lived as a steady current. He had no words to cast into the air, no melodies to carve with breath, but within his chest a deeper music stirred. That music belonged to the body itself, the steady drum of the heart, the whisper of blood traveling through its endless rivers, the slow tide of breath filling and falling away. This silent song is not only his, it is yours, too. Even now, as you lie still, your body hums with a music so soft that you do not always notice it. Every heartbeat sends a ripple through your chest. Every inhale carries molecules of air, each one ancient, once breathed by forests, oceans, and perhaps even other beating hearts long before yours. Every exhale gives back to the world a part of yourself. Scientists call this the rhythm of homeostasis, the balancing act that keeps your inner world steady. The prince, though he never learned the word, understood its meaning by feel alone. His silence was not absence, it was balance. The shadow had thought to frighten him with emptiness, to convince him that his voicelessness was weakness. But shadows misunderstand silence. They imagine it as hollow, when in truth it is crowded with unspoken strength. The prince closed his eyes and pressed his palm to the star, feeling the small warmth of her glow against his skin. He did not need to speak. He only needed to let the silent song rise through him like water welling from the earth. And what is silence, really? If you lean close enough to the world, you discover that absolute silence does not exist. Even in the quietest chamber, humans have ever built a room sealed from echo, padded until sound cannot rebound. People do not hear nothing. They hear themselves. They hear the gurgle of their stomach, the throb of blood through their ears, the slow creak of muscles as they shift. In such silence, some grow restless, others find peace. The prince chose peace. He let the rhythm of his body guide him. Each breath was like a tide, pulling in and sliding out again, calm and eternal. Around him, the shadow waited, hoping for weakness. But the prince's silence became not an absence, but a presence so steady that it frightened the darkness. In science, silence has often revealed more than noise. Astronomers, for instance, have long listened to the silence of space, that vast expanse where no air exists to carry sound. Yet even there, the quiet is not truly empty. Light travels, radiation hums, particles whisper across unimaginable distances. The cosmos has its own kind of music, one that cannot be heard with ears, but can be seen, measured, translated into patterns. The prince's silent song was not so different. Though his lips did not form words, his quiet strength traveled outward, carried in the unwavering light of his loyalty. She realized that what holds two beings together is not always what is said aloud, but what is shared in silence, the unbreakable trust, the unspoken promise. You know this too, don't you? Think of the moments in your life when words fell away. A hand held in yours, a glance that lingered, the warmth of someone's presence beside you in stillness. These are silent songs, just as real and just as binding as any spoken vow. The shadow began to recoil. It did not understand this kind of music. It tried to cloak the star once more, but the more it pressed, the stronger the prince's silence became. His song was not made of sound, but of steadiness, of the refusal to be broken. It pulsed outward like waves, invisible yet undeniable. Nature holds many examples of silent songs. Whales sing deep notes across oceans, so low that human ears cannot always perceive them. Trees exchange whispers through underground fungal threads, passing nutrients and warnings without a sound. Even your own brain hums with electrical signals, a quiet language of neurons sparking and resting again. The world is never still, never voiceless. The music is always there, waiting to be felt. The prince, resting in his silence, became like the whales, like the trees, like the stars themselves. His voicelessness transformed into connection. And as the shadow faltered, you sense that silence does not weaken, it deepens. You lie back further, imagining yourself drifting on this current of stillness. Your heartbeat joins the rhythm of the prince's. Your breath slows into tides that wash the edges of the night. Silence is not emptiness. It is fullness beyond words. The shadow trembled now, for silence carried truth that it could not smother. Darkness can cover light, but only for a moment. Silence, however, is not something to be covered. It is the foundation. Beneath all things, the space in which stars shine, in which music begins, in which words themselves are born. The star glowed more steadily, leaning into the prince's touch. Her light no longer flickered, no longer feared the envious shadow. She understood now that light does not need to fight darkness. It only needs to shine and to be held steady by love, even if that love has no voice. The prince remained quiet. He had no words to banish the shadow, but he had his heart, and the rhythm of his heart was unyielding. Silence itself became his song, and the shadow found it could not endure. Slowly, like mist dissolving at dawn, it began to fade, retreating back into the corners from which it had come. You feel this too, don't you? The strength in silence, the comfort in knowing that beneath all the noise of the world, your own heart beats its steady measure, guiding you deeper into rest. The prince's song is your song. It does not need to be heard aloud. It only needs to be felt. And as the shadow disappears, the night grows softer once more. The star shines, and the prince stands beside her, silent but unshaken. His loyalty has proven stronger than envy, his quiet devotion brighter than any voice. Yet even now, as the silence settles, a question stirs. If silence itself can sing, then what of the spaces between stars? What other songs lie hidden in the dark, waiting to be heard without ears, waiting to be felt in stillness? And so, in the quiet after the shadow fades, you are left wondering what other hidden songs the universe carries, songs not of sound, but of presence, waiting in the spaces between stars. A star that stayed. The garden is quiet now. The darkness that once pressed against the glass flowers has receded, leaving only a faint memory, like a dream, already softening at the edges. You feel the stillness, a calmness that comes after storms, not empty, but full, as though every leaf and crystal breathes out in relief. The star glows steadily once more, her light no longer trembling beneath the weight of shadow, and the prince, silent as always, stands within that glow, his heart echoing with something both fragile and enduring. The star could have risen back into the sky. She could have resumed her endless journey across the night, tracing arcs of fire through galaxies. Stars are, after all, wanderers of the universe, moving on scales of time so vast that even eternity feels small beside them. But instead, she chooses to remain close enough that her light lingers against the petals of the glass garden. It is a decision both improbable and intimate, as though the cosmos itself pauses here, bending its great span toward one quiet boy. You notice how her glow changes the world around them. The glass blossoms gleam as though dawn has been folded into their stems. Their crystalline edges refract light into soft halos, creating illusions of other stars, ghost-like, echoing her presence. Light does this everywhere in the universe, bending, scattering, weaving new visions. On Earth, light streaming through mist creates halos around the moon. In faraway galaxies, gravity itself bends starlight, curving it into rings and arcs that astronomers call Einstein's halos. And here, in this enchanted garden, the physics of light feels like poetry. Every shard of glass, every droplet of dew, participates in the star's song of presence. The prince does not speak, but he does not need to. His silence becomes a mirror, reflecting the star's glow. In science, silence too has its counterpart. Outer space is often called a vacuum, a place without sound. Yet silence in the cosmos is never truly empty. Electromagnetic waves hum invisibly, particles drift, faint whispers of energy crossing light years. Even the cosmic microwave background, the faint afterglow of the Big Bang murmurs like the oldest lullaby. The star's light reminds you of this, that silence itself carries meaning, that even without words, companionship is possible. The kingdom beyond the garden begins to notice. At night, villagers look up toward the royal grounds and see a soft gleam that should not be there. Stars belong in the sky, they think, not nestled in the orchards and courtyards of stone. And yet, they whisper, the light is real. It seems to flicker in rhythm with the seasons. Some say the prince has found a companion who needs no voice to understand him. Others imagine blessings or omens or the quiet approval of heavens watching the earth. Across time, humans have always given stories to the lights that refuse to leave us. Constellations are born this way, through whispers, through imagination, through wonder turned into myth. You can almost hear those ancient echoes: Orion the hunter, Cassiopeia the queen, Cygnus the swan. Each name is a reminder that light is never only physics. It is memory, narrative, and comfort. Perhaps the prince and his star, too, will one day become part of that tapestry, their tail folded into the sky's fabric as another constellation. The thought drifts softly in your mind, like the way a bedtime story lingers just before dreams. In the garden, the nights deepen. The prince sits among the blossoms, and the star glows beside him, steady as breath. Time stretches, days pass, seasons turn. Sometimes the garden fills with snow, and her glow scatters across the frost, as though 1,000 smaller stars have descended to rest on the earth. Sometimes the summer heat bends the air, and her light ripples like reflections across water. Always she stays. In astronomy, stars themselves seem to stay, though they are never still. They move, they burn, they age. The star in this tale bends the rules, but perhaps that is the secret of stories. They allow eternity to fold into moments, and companionship to bend the arc of the cosmos. For the prince, her presence becomes a rhythm. Each night he feels her arrival like a steady heartbeat. He cannot speak, yet he no longer needs to search for words. The glow itself is conversation. Silence becomes not absence, but abundance. You feel the weight of that truth settle into your own breathing, reminding you that stillness is never empty. It can be full of meaning, if only you linger long enough to listen. There is science in this lesson, too. In the universe, light is one of the most constant companions. It moves at a speed that defines space and time themselves. To see light is to glimpse history. When you look at a star in the sky, you see it not as it is now, but as it was long ago, perhaps thousands of years in the past. Starlight carries memory across vast distances, whispering of what once was, yet arriving in the present as if it always belonged. And so the star in the garden, choosing to stay, becomes more than a companion. She becomes memory made visible, a reminder that presence itself is a form of time travel. The villagers' whispers grow softer, transforming into acceptance. They stop questioning why a star remains near the prince and instead carry comfort from knowing she does. It is not unlike how humans have learned to live with the mysteries of the cosmos. We do not yet know all the answers. Why stars die in supernova, birthing heavier elements. Why some collapse into black holes, hiding their truths beyond horizons. But we live beside those questions, warmed by the light that reaches us nonetheless. Mystery itself becomes a companion, staying with us as steadily as the star stays with the prince. The glass garden blooms and withers again and again. Seasons bend, years curl upon themselves. The prince grows older, though his silence never fades, and still the star lingers, her glow never dimming. It is not her nature to remain forever. Stars burn out, after all, even the brightest. Yet here, in this story, she bends the truth of astrophysics, choosing love over law, choosing stillness over movement. And perhaps that is why the kingdom begins to believe, because within the laws of science, there is always space for wonder. You imagine sitting there yourself, beside the prince and the star, your breathing slowing in rhythm with their companionship. The night feels endless, yet gentle. Shadows no longer threaten. The glow is enough. You feel your eyelids soften, your thoughts lengthen like quiet tides. The lesson drifts clear. Silence can be its own kind of music, and presence can be its own kind of light. And as you sink deeper into that thought, you realize the tale is not only about the prince or the star. It is also about you, your own silences, your own moments of light. Just as the garden learns to hold stillness without fear, so too can you carry silence without loneliness. Light remains always. Companionship lingers, even in wordless spaces. And wonder, like starlight, has no need to rush. The night grows fuller, softer, like a blanket settling over the garden. The star's glow does not waver. She is more than light now. She is presence itself. And the prince, silent but not alone, teaches a final truth without ever speaking it, that in stillness you can still be heard, that in silence you can still be known. The villagers say their story is finished, that the star stayed, and the prince was never again without companionship. But you know better. Stories are never finished. They ripple outward, carried by light, echoing in silences that follow. Theirs is not an ending, but a pause, a soft ellipsis written into the night sky. And so the chapter closes, not with finality, but with wonder, for even as the star stays, another question rises, soft as dawn. What waits for them, and for you, when the sky itself begins to change? Thank you for sharing this quiet night with me. May the glow of the star and the silence of the prince guide you gently into dreams. Good night.